welcome back to my channel. I'm Danielle and I'm the owner of Damn Fancy Creations and the Drunk Flamingo. Today's tutorial is going to be my first fall tumbler of the year, and I love how it turned out. It's definitely more of a retro vibe. It is a little bit more of a simpler tumbler, so if you are a new tumbler maker, this is definitely something that you should be able to master with no problems. We're going to be doing a spray painted ombre and then also a glitter ombre on just the vinyl stripes, and I really like the contrast of the vinyl and the glitter, and then the spray painted ombre next to it, and the fall kind of retro colors kind of bring everything together. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe so you are the first to know about new tutorials that drop on my channel. And if you want to recreate this tumbler, the description has a list of all my materials that I use, as well as discount codes from my favorite suppliers. If you are ready to see how I created this tumbler, let's get started. Alright y'all, so here is the tumbler and the vinyl pattern that we're going to be using today. This is a 30-ounce skinny from HOGG, and this is a retro pumpkin with some retro flowers on it. I love this pattern a lot. I actually had it printed to release last year, but for some reason I did not end up releasing it, so I decided to release it this year. So to start, we're going to kind of measure out our template that we need for our tumbler. So I am just putting my tumbler against my vinyl, and I just put a little dot where the tumbler's height was. Then we're going to wrap the vinyl around and then put another dot for the circumference of the vinyl, or the tumbler, sorry. So the measurement that we did around is going to be the circumference, and then the measurement up the side is going to be the height. So I'm going to take this to my paper cutter, and we're just going to cut a straight line for the height and the circumference. So now that we have our vinyl little rectangle cut out, we're going to apply that to our tumbler. So I'm going to get my cup cradle from Cami Page Boutique, and this is how I draw my straight lines on my tumbler. I'm just going to take a Sharpie and draw a straight line. I usually just do the middle of the tumbler. I can usually get a pretty good vinyl application just drawing it in the center of the tumbler. And we're going to use the hinge method, so I'm just going to pull back a little bit of this vinyl and cut off some of the backing. And we're going to use this as a hinge to apply our vinyl. That way, if we are a little bit off on the vinyl application, we can just peel it back and adjust it if needed. So I'm just going to do this a couple times. Sometimes I can get it right on the money and just put it on there perfectly. Sometimes I do have to adjust it a couple times. But once I get it straight, we're just going to use my little vinyl squeegee, and we're going to smooth down the vinyl as I'm pulling that backing off. And I ended up cutting this vinyl pretty well, but if your vinyl is overhanging the top or the bottom, I like to use my edging tools. You can kind of see them in the corner here. These are from Cami Page Boutique also, and we do have a discount code for her that will be in the description. But the edging tools are perfect for getting a straight line on your top and bottom rims. And I also like to use my heat gun. This helps smooth down the vinyl on the top and the bottom of your tumbler. I even do this if I'm going to be using the edging tools, because that way you get a smooth cut line and you're not going to be cutting over wrinkles or creases. So once we have our vinyl on there perfectly, we are going to go straight into applying our tape template. So usually I use painter's tape, but I was running kind of low. So I have this masking tape, and if y'all have watched my tutorials in the past, y'all know that I do not measure hardly at all. I just kind of wing it. And I do the same thing if I'm doing my spray painted plaids. And I was kind of deciding how thick I wanted my spray painted lines to be and how thick I wanted my glitter lines to be. So I decided that I wanted my vinyl stripes to be 2 tape lines thick and my spray painted lines only 1. So I'm just laying down basically 3 pieces of tape, and then I'm pulling the center one because we're using that one as our spacer. And then I'm laying that one right next to the other tape line. I think it was, yeah, my spray painted lines were 1 thick and my vinyl lines were 2 thick. I couldn't remember how I did it. A lot of times I just kind of wing stuff as I go. So we're laying down 2 pieces of tape and then we're pulling 1. And I'm just moving this one a little closer together because when we spray paint, I want to make sure that there's no cracks, that spray paint isn't going to get underneath anything. So now when I get to the edge, obviously it is not spaced out, you know, perfect because I didn't measure, but I'm just not somebody that measures. If you are, definitely measure beforehand. I just, you know, don't do it. So I decided that we are going to space this with 1.5 piece of tape. So I'm just going back and scooting over some of these. So this little spacer that I'm using is 1.5 pieces of tape thick, and we're just going back and spacing those out a little bit more. Y'all can obviously tell, like, I'm not a perfectionist. Some things really bother me, like, for some reason I always try to cover the seams on my tumblers and other things, but stuff like this doesn't really bother me too much. I'm not going to get it perfect to the millimeter of a measurement. So I was just kind of measuring these, and these are close enough for me. They were all pretty much the same. So I ended up doing this about 1.5. It's probably like a little bit more than 1 inch because I think this tape is like 3/4 of an inch thick. So now I'm just taking some of this tape that I have on the bottom and I am just covering right along that bottom edge. I do not epoxy the bottom of my tumblers. For me, I just can never get them 100% level on the bottom, and that really bothers me. Sometimes I would have a tumbler that was perfect everywhere except the bottom was slightly uneven, and then I would have to sand and epoxy again, and it would just always frustrate me. So I just stopped epoxying the bottom of my cups. And I'm doing the same thing for the top. Since I already have a pretty good rim, I just went ahead and taped off those little sections so I didn't have to worry about the spray paint that was just on these 1/2 inch sections on the top. So now we're going to take this outside and spray paint, and I did not film this. It's kind of hard for me to film myself spray painting, but basically I sprayed 1 stripe copper at the top, and the one next to it was the smoky beige at the top, and I alternated that. So it was copper beige on one stripe and then beige copper on the next stripe, and I just did that all the way around the tumbler. And I did check before I spray painted to make sure that it would end correctly and not have a copper at the top next to another copper at the top. So we kind of get this alternating ombre all around the tumbler. And I did have a little oopsie, if you saw, where I actually spray painted over the seam right here, so the seam is visible. But I do go back and fix that. So basically, after I epoxy my tumbler, I just taped off the area again and then re-spray painted in those same colors so that we were spray painting over a super smooth base instead of the seam. So that's a little trick if you mess up and the seam is visible under your spray paint. Typically, I try to match up my tape right on that seam, but since I went back and re-spaced out those tape lines, it kind of threw off my seam a little bit, and I totally forgot or didn't notice until after I spray painted. So now we're going to apply our glitter. We are using cinnamon whiskey maple sour, I think, cinnamon whiskey sour, and cowgirl colada. So I'm basically going to take my glitter glue from Artistry and we're going to just paint this glitter glue right over our vinyl. And I'm bringing up this glitter glue a little bit further than I want my glitter to fall. That way we can get a good ombre. So I am just tapping this on there. And I think my plan was actually to use this fine glitter, and I don't think I ended up using it. Yeah, so I put it back. My plan was to add a little bit of that orange in there, but I liked the contrast of just the gold against the vinyl. So I ended up just adding this, and Cowgirl Colada is a mix of cuts. So I'm still able to use my tea strainer to get a little bit of that fine glitter and get a good gradient on the glitter application. And if y'all have watched my tutorials in the past, y'all know I always use this tea strainer if I'm trying to get a good ombre. It just really helps blend those colors in. And another tip is the higher you hold your glitter or make your glitter fall, the more spread out those glitter flakes are going to be. So we are just going to do this for all of the stripes. And if y'all have not tried a glitter glue, I do highly suggest it. I do not use Mod Podge for anything pretty much unless I absolutely have to. I really like the glitter glue because it kind of spreads out, very similar to epoxy, and you get a nice smooth surface to apply your glitter on versus one that can leave streaks like Mod Podge. And Mod Podge can also dry kind of quickly, so you have to work a little faster, whereas glitter glue, at least the one from Artistry, it does stay pretty wet for quite a while. So I just apply the larger flakes first, and then I tap a few times on the tea strainer to get a good gradient and get some smaller flakes on the top of the ombre. So we're going to brush this off when it dries. I clear coat with Rustoleum 2 times, and then I epoxied twice. Now this right here is fresh spray paint. This is where I taped off those other 2 sides, and I went and spray painted that section again so that we are not able to see the seam in that vinyl. So now we're going to pinstripe. I made sure that the tumbler was smooth. We don't want to apply pinstripes over glitter grains that you can feel, especially on metallic vinyl like this, because you will be able to see the crinkles in the vinyl. If you're using a matte color like a black, white, or regular color, then under epoxy you wouldn't be able to tell if it was applied over a glitter grain or not, but metallic vinyl kind of shows every flaw. And if you guys did not know, I do have a digital file on thedrunkflamingo.com for my pinstripes. It is also linked in the description, and it is a file that has my most popular pinstripe sizes, which is 0.07, 0.05, and 0.03. And I like to cut out a full sheet of every color that I cut. That way I'm going to have 3 different sizes in multiple different colors. So if I want a variation in my pinstripes, or if I want to layer them, I can do so, and I don't have to worry about cutting just a few pinstripes every time I want to do a tumbler. So we are just applying our pinstripes, and I'm just using a free blade to cut my pinstripes. Sometimes when I try to use my actual X-Acto knife or the blade that I'm using, the handle can kind of get in the way of like cutting the vinyl flat. So I just like to use a free blade to do that. That way I can get a good angle. But just be careful, don't cut yourself. And some other tips that I have for applying pinstripes: I always like to use my heat gun to heat up the vinyl a little bit, heat that adhesive a little bit more, so that way you get good adhesion to the tumbler. I also like to take either clear UV nail polish or clear UV resin and apply it just over the ends of the vinyl and cure it. That way those ends are not going to lift under epoxy. And after you have your pinstripes on, we're just going to take this downstairs and apply 2 more coats of epoxy. Anytime I have vinyl or decals or pinstripes, I always like to apply 2 coats of epoxy. That way I'm sure that everything has a nice layer and is sealed in well. So these are the finished pictures. I love how this turned out. It is, like I said in the beginning, a little bit more of a simpler tumbler, but I love the retro vibes, and I hope you guys do too. If y'all enjoyed this tutorial or learned something new, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to catch the next video coming up that was picked just for you. As always, if you're looking for tips, tricks, or tutorials, be sure to check out my tutorial group on Facebook and the Drunk Flamingo group. Both are linked in the description. Thanks for watching.